So.
Oh, Marina is here. Wonderful. Hello, Marina. So I think we can start. What do you think? It's recording now. Tchertov, it's okay with you?
Yes, but I'd like to start my presentation. My report is titled on Intralogical Means of Communication in Culture. Its subject is the means of communication with intralogical meanings. They differ from words and similar conventional signs that are used for logical constructions, because these meanings relate to other levels of psychical activity. According to Jean Piaget, the class of intralogical operations includes mental actions with schemes of perception and behavior. Like logical concepts, these schemes regulate not the very special relationships, but the spatial and temporal relations between the parts and the whole. The intralogical images are the main content that is expressed by the means of many arts, music, architecture, painting, etc. Because this artistic means various sensory and perceptual images, behavior.
Tchertov, we can hear the presentation, but we cannot see the presentation. Are you showing the presentation?
Yes, I see my representation, but do you not see anything?
No, we are not seeing. We are only listening.
So, one moment, please.
Okay. So I will introduce the panel formally. So it's the beginning of the panel 4. It's the name Cognitive Semiotics, Linguistics, and Multimodality. So the first presenter is Leonid Tchertov. He will present. Each presenter has 15 minutes. So then we'll have 5 minutes for questions. So let's begin with Tchertov. Here in our screen, we have this share screen below us, and you can click here on the side of the chat to present.
Yes. My report is titled on Intralogical Means of Communication in Culture.
We are only listening again.
Its subject is do you hear me?
Only listening, we are not seeing.
There is a share screen button, a green one. You can click on it and you can share the presentation there.
The report is titled on Intralogical Means of Communication. Do you hear my speech?
Only listening. We are not seeing the presentation, unfortunately.
So, I read in another way.
Okay.
The subject of my report is the means of communication with intralogical meanings. They differ from words and similar conventional signs
that are used for logical constructions, because these meanings relate to other levels of psychical activity. According to Jean Piaget, the class of intralogical operations includes mental actions with schemes of perception and of behavior. Unlike logical concepts, these schemes regulate not the genus-species relationships, but the spatial and temporal relations between the parts and the whole. The intralogical images are the main content that is expressed by the means of many arts, music, architecture, painting, etc. Due to these artistic means, various sensory and perceptual images, behavior patterns of moving, and as well as emotions can be communicated rather than abstract thoughts. Research of these intralogical means in terms of semiotics supposes a certain methodological position. The concepts of classical semiotics are based on logical and linguistic studies of their creators. As is well known, Charles Peirce developed his theory of science as a revision of logic, while Ferdinand de Saussure saw linguistics as the basic model to guide the semiology that he conceived. However, the analogies with verbal language are not sufficient for studies of intralogical means, since they often have properties which absent in it are different. In particular, for many of these means, at least one of two principles formulated by the Saussure is irrelevant. These are the principle of arbitrariness or motivation of the ties between signifier and signified, and the principle of linearity of signifiers. The motivated relationship between signifiers and signified is typical for many of expressive means in nonverbal arts. Instead of arbitrary signs, the bearers of meanings are here, first of all, indexes of various states and signals stimulating diverse mental reactions to them. Similarly, the second principle of Saussurean semiology, which demands linear arrangement of signifiers and their subordination to irreversible time, is also inoperative in spatial arts. Many of them, meaningful relationships unfold simultaneously in 2 or 3 dimensions, each of which gives different meanings to these relations. Therefore, Saussurean semiology, as well as linguistic models in general, has limited application to such intralogical means of communication. In this relation, Pearson semiotics opens up more possibilities than Saussurean project, since it does not limit the field of semiotic researches to purely conventional science, but includes indexes and icons as well. However, all these representations are distinguishable only on the ground of their relations to represented objects. Indices through relations to continuity, and icons through relations of similarity to them. At the same time, the relations to communicating subjects remain unreviewed. Going beyond the limits of logic or linguistics, the description of the lower cognitive levels of the psyche, together with projective and affective images used in arts, is traditionally produced within the frameworks of psychology and aesthetics. However, it is quite possible their semiotic description as a specific intralogical meanings in content planes of corresponding nonverbal semiotic systems. This was assumed as early as the 18th century in a semiotic project by Alexander Baumgarten, aimed at describing the lower level of mental activity in art, as opposed to the highest logical level in science. For about 3 centuries, aesthetics has studied and developed ideas dating back to ancient times about visible and audible signs and symbols that are understood not by reason but by intuition. The means of conveying sensorial impressions and emotions was be feeling and empathy, etc., have also been the subject of aesthetic researches. Today, this nonverbal means of communication capable of conveying intralogical meanings can be described in a pertinent system of semiotic concepts. At the same time, this system itself must be enough broad to include not only models of logical connections and linguistic constructions. Such system of semiotics must be able to describe all the schemes of building visual and auditory images that are formed at the lower cognitive levels of imagination, perception, and even sensation. This infralogical semiotics includes also projective images, models of the subject own behavior, which are created at different level of planning his movements and actions in an environment. The signal and indexical means of expressing effective images, emotions of various kinds, also belong to the same infralogical sphere. This is semiotics not of conventional science, but of motivated signals and indexes. Such infralogical semiotics considers, together with relations of communicative means, to represented objects, also their relations to communicated subjects. Unlike anti-psychologically oriented semiotic projects, infralogical semiotics does not react psychological content from its subject. On the contrary, it develops its concepts taking into account the infralogical specificity of the content conveyed by the signal indexical means that it studies. This way, it opens up means of expressions that are inaccessible to linguistically or logocentric oriented semiotics. In particular, such infralogical semiotics can study various psychosemiotic forms of shifted comprehension. As far back as Augustine formulated the psychological distinction between signifier and signified. This is a difference between something that is open for the senses and something else that becomes content of the thoughts. However, the awakening of thoughts by conventional science is only one case of what might be called shifted comprehension. In contrast to direct comprehension, which is oriented as the object presented to the senses, the shifted comprehension is aimed at other objects represented by semiotic means, which can be more or less transparent for their meanings. Compared with words and other conventional signs, the pictorial images or architectural constructions can be even more transparent for their meanings. Their senses are not limited to logical concepts and perceptual images, but can also be perceptual imagery or motor schemes at different levels of sight. Along with shifted understanding of conventional science, we can talk about shifted recognition. For example, when a piece of marble is recognized as a woman torso. Similarly, interpreting paints on the surface of a canvas is as a seascape or a still life requires a shifted perception, and experiencing the same paints as warm or cold can be an example of shifted sensation, which evokes quasi-sensory images of other modalities. There are among graphical means in visual spatial communicative channel, together with fully arbitrary ideograms, although they increasingly dependent on sensor images, pictograms, perceptograms, and sensograms. These diverse forms of shifted comprehension are performed diverse semiotic functions, and they are regulated by various codes. The codes regulating information and interpretation of ideograms can have in their content plans logical concepts and their connections. This type of visual spatial codes includes in particular numbers and other mathematical characters, special science of logic, physics, chemistry, and other sciences. Each of them uses its own set of ideograms as a special semiotic system. Unlike them, the codes of lower cognitive levels have in their content plane not the logical concepts, but the intralogical images of diverse types. These semiotic systems mediate the communication of perceptual and sensory images or plans of behavior. Their content plane is built at various levels of cognitive images, of projective thinking, or of affective impressions. All these systems mediate the connections between nonverbal images at different mental levels, and they give possibility to communicate their intralogical contents that arise in a result of shifted comprehension. In particular, recognition code regulates not only direct but also shifted recognition at the perceptual level. This in cases of sculptures that is recognized as a human figure rather than a marble piece. In a similar way, there is a complex of perceptographic codes which regulate a transition from the flat surface of a picture to three-dimensional space of represented objects that is created at the perceptual level in shifted perception. More one complex of synesthetic codes regulates diverse ways of shifted sensation at the sensory level, where quasi-sensorial images of various modalities are created. Many of these codes with intralogical content have still natural roots. They are not the secondary semiotic systems of in terms of Tartu Moscow Semiotic School, because they are not derived from a verbal language, although these codes of natural origin are transformed in the culture and interact with many of its semiotic systems.
1 minute more, please, Chertov. 1 minute more, please.
I finished. The codes regulating the formation and interpretation of intralogical meanings at various levels of psyche are not translatable into each other and into verbal language, although the last can describe them. In the same time, these codes can interact with each other and form heterogeneous intralogical texts, which are typical for pieces of arts and can be a subject not only semiotic researchers, but also of special intralogical rhetoric. More detailed semiotic study of this intralogical means of communication is a task of the future researchers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Chertov. Now we are open for questions. If anyone would ask, you can do it in the chat, or you can raise hands and ask, open the microphone. So I will only recommend an author. There is a Center of Pragmatism here in Brazil, and they are studying Peirce. And it's very interesting because we have a professor, Ivo Sadi-Ibri. He's developing the Peirce's philosophy to theory of art. So of course, Peirce didn't develop aesthetic, didn't study the objects of art, but I think it's very interesting to try to use these concepts in art theory. So if we don't have any questions, we will begin the next presentation. It's George Metaxiotis and Alexandros Kleftodimos, the problem of translation between media, internal, external multimodality in media semiotics.
Hi, I hope you can see the presentation.
Perfectly, thank you.
Okay. We are from the University of Western Macedonia, Department of Communication and Digital Media. And this paper, we present problems of translation between media. Why these are problems? There are problems in translation between media. And what we suggest as the solution or a theoretical framework to solve and facilitate these problems through the distinction between internal and external multimodality. And okay. So during this conference, we have had a lot of definitions about the key concepts of these problems, like translation, intersemiosis, intericonicity, transmediality, intermediality. Of course, our point of view is multimodality. And the use of multimodality for translation through media, and the main concepts used to describe this process are transposition, adaptation, transmutation, transduction. There is overlapping between these terms. I'll try to be as concise as possible and quick. And so there are a lot of problems when we deal with intersemiotics, intericonicity, and multimodality. The first is that the typologies are very evading, I would say. Like we can see in this picture, it's a photograph from Margaret Bourke-White, 1937, I think. And we see the change in modality. We have a prototext, that is the billboard, the painting, and the metatext is a photograph by Bourke-White that changes completely the meaning. And we think that this certain type of multimodality use is of a kind of interpretational use. It's not exactly a translation, it's more of an interpretation. And it's a good use of interpretation. There are more bad uses and ideological uses and oppressive uses of multimodality. And in this case, we can identify some kind of dialectical images, what Walter Benjamin stated, and in his unfinished project Arcades, and Susan Buck-Morse tried to remake this project for the dialectical image in her book, The Dialectics of Seeing. So through photography, that is a different modality. The older modality, or the prototext, makes a new, better reality, acquires a new, better view on reality, reality not seen before the photographer now reveals it. And we have seen this used in documentary and social photography very often. The most perfect example of what a dialectical image is, I think, is this image juxtaposition found in the book of Dialectics of Seeing. And it presents one type of modality, that is a traffic circle proposed in 1906 by Eugene Hennard. And what happens in reality, a photography, and what seemed in the painting like a simple and elegant solution is a real chaos in traffic. And so through these dialectical images, the change of modality becomes revealing hidden aspects of reality. Another use of multimodality in terms of interpretation is we have seen all these photographs reappropriation or resemiotization in children textbook or adult textbooks, I don't know. And so this is a funny, what Goffman would say, minor frame break, a definition of parody. We can see this technique of intersemiosis and resemiotization used very often in cinema and parody films. These are pictures from my workshops, and where resemiotization happens and the modality change of the picture. For example, these are from a classroom of history, and the students try to connect themselves to a historical figure like Alexander the Great. And of course, the result is a parody and of sort, because there is a great opposition between these modalities, and they reflect the difference. But again, it's an adaptation or a reappropriation use. Another adaptation use of multimodality is happening very often in our workshop, and we can see that even children, but adults also use techniques of objectification in order to layer the storytelling and make focus to a central character and put other characters they don't want, they don't like, their fathers, mothers, or people they don't like, the teacher, for example, in a position of a layer, a lesser modality, a more fantasy modality. It's a kind of objectification, but it's not a bad objectification. I would say not ideological objectification. It's just a funny reappropriation and a way of storytelling that has been used for centuries in paintings. The way to use different modalities to focus on a specific character. But there are also a third type of use of multimodality, and this is what is more interesting because it's more oppressive. And so we see that is a frame from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And in this case, we see that the male is presented as a real character, a photography, and the woman has the modality of a cartoon and an animal. And it's, of course, a lower status. It is being objectified and dehumanized through the terms of multimodality. Again, the multimodality is used a different interpretation. Even worse, in nationalism, we have seen that the change of modality is used to dehumanize completely a specific group of people that the power or the authority doesn't like. And this is the worst type of use of multimodality we can see as a kind of interpretation. And I would say that why we need translation, because interpretation is not enough, and because the main reason why we need translation is that we live in a multicultural society, and we have to understand how our differences communicate, and there is a common understanding how we build this base reality that is needed so much to make a translation. So our methodology is to analyze interpretations, comparative interpretations of text. I will focus on two main corpus of texts. So the corpus of the texts I use is, the first case is in 1982, and the aim of this methodology is to build a theoretical framework of what are internal modalities. And by internal modalities, we mean the modalities that are not relevant to any specific material, that are irrelevant with whether it is verbal or visual, what makes these different semiotic systems connect. This is a very old question of isomorphism, before even the intersemiotic question was raised. So in 1992, John Berger and Moore, in their book, Another Way of Telling, they conducted an experiment in photographic interpretation by asking several individuals to interpret a specific set of pictures. If it was a workshop, I would ask you to make a short interpretation of these pictures, and we could analyze and find common elements. Of course, they used different variables of different gender, different social and economic status, different age, market gardener, clergyman, etc. You can see it wasn't the proper analysis, but we did a linguistic analysis of that. And the second corpus and the huge data, because this is a project running, it's still running. It started, I think, 2012, and it's called What is Going On in the Picture, and it's a media literacy project by New York Times in collaboration to Visual Thinking Strategies. It's an NGO organization for media literacy. So what is this project about? On the contrary to the previous project by Moore, this is not just asking what's going on in the picture. This is the first question, but also what do you see that makes you say that? What more can you find? So they show to the readers of the newspaper a specific photograph without any context. The readers reply and give their interpretations. And the next day, so you see April 2, they reveal the context of the photograph. So through moderators and facilitators, they try to introduce more evidence-based interpretation and more facilitated and reflection-oriented interpretations. But again, you can see some part of the chat. So from all these comparative analyses of text on photography, we can see that there is always a linguistic common ground that emerges, and that involves many elements of the deep grammar of space and time. And up to this, there is a great consensus in academic community in many scientific fields, like in sociology. Durkheim said, if humankind did not agree upon conceptions of time, space, cause, and number, all contact between their minds would be impossible. And but although there is a great consensus over the need of translation, there is a little technical information of how this process is done. So the most technical tools that we have found is the modalities presented by pairs as symbol, icon, and index. That is the equivalent of deep grammar in linguistics. But contrary, we don't use Peirce's definitions because this is philosophical and has a long rationalization, and it's a long debate in philosophy behind that. We wanted just a technical use of these tools. And contrary to Peirce's definitions, we suggest a more technical definition that describes not the typologies of the sign, not the icon as a type of sign, but as a process, a modality. So the three modalities we have identified in order to analyze the text is the symbol, but not as language. We avoid to use the term language because this is a totally different autonomous scientific field, but we use alphabetical modality, the icon as numerical modality. So the first that gave a technical definition of these two verbal and visual signs was Jakobson, who said that the verbal sign is always discrete. And we know that from Martinet, the double articulation, it's a double articulation system. And Saussure, of course, and the visual sign is always hierarchical. But again, though Jakobson is giving the technical information, the technical is the word discrete or alphabetical, and the hierarchical is the word numerical. He still connects these two modalities to language and visuality. And of course, we know that this is not, there is a lot of evidence that, for example, we cannot suggest that numerical modality or icons can apply only to visual medium, because blind people have icons or mental icons, and mute people or deaf people and can use sign language or hieroglyphs. There are many cases where alphabetical is not restricted to phonetics. And so the third modality that is the most tricky is the indexical. Again, we don't use the definition given by index for index by pairs. And we use Latour's definition of agency. We see the indexicality as a micro-narrative that depends on the actor network theory, system of actor network, and black box networks, and what Calon said, translation networks. So two major consequences of this technical definition and analysis through the use of internal multimodality is that we have to, in order to proceed to this translation of intersemiotic translation, we need to understand first that alphabetical modality is necessary for the reading of any image. The first time I saw this picture, I realized that there is no way to understand this picture. Of course, this is a very special picture. It belongs to surrealism, and photographers and painters from the art movement of surrealism were very specific on employing these internal modalities. So an analysis of any picture, of any image, would involve the categories that we can present them as set theory in mathematics, and some categories may be more culturally defined, but some are more anthropological, like everybody can understand that this is a human being, this is a moving object, even I don't know that it is a train. Yes, of course, there are more culturally defined categories, but what we call symbols. I don't know maybe what style of a bridge is, what style of a building is this. I'm not French. I don't know what's going on exactly in the picture. But again, there are anthropological categories necessary to read the picture. And again, what is very important in this methodology of this internal multimodality that is irrelevant to the medium material is that the icon is not defined as something essentially different. The icon is just, as it is the grammar in language, it's just symbols, categories that have a numerical value. And this happened, for example, in ancient Greek, the alphabet was also a numerical system. So we have the alphabetical system, the categories, and some categories are used as a numerical system. So this presents the icons. And through this combination, we always need an index. There is no image without an index. So Chomsky refers to the function of this indexicality as the basic rule in deep grammar, and that is called merge. And merge is more or less the same definition with frame in photography and montage in cinema. And we find similar definitions of this internal modality of indexicality and agency. So through these combinations, we can make phrases very favorite for surrealism. The man is black, the train is black, so the man is a train. And of course, these verbal elements are not written in the picture, but there are limitations on what verbal elements we can find in the picture. Another case example, we can say the man is a lion, Of course, we see the categories, the man, the lion, the table, the fruits, but we have a grammatical modality, the iconic, that is the texture of the image. And through this textural tautology, we can say that the man is a lion. And this is a technique
Sorry,
used.
George, 1 minute, please. Sorry, 1 minute.
Okay, so again, the numerical modality is necessary for the reading of any text. That's the second consequence. We have seen in many texts, it's a nice story. I don't have the time to read it to you, but it's a story by Anastasia, 10 years old. It's full of vivid imagery. And Ethan is so abstract in his storytelling that you cannot translate this into any kind of visualization. And there are other applications that we can use of this internal multimodality. For example, this is a news article by New York Times that about the teacher that was beheaded in a terrorist attack in Paris. And the first interpretation use of multimodality, we see that the text never changes in all three versions of editorials. All they have just few hours or few minutes difference between them. And this shows how different interpretations of modality produce a new translation, a better translation of the image. And we see that there is not just the photograph that changes, it is the iconic inside, the icon inside the verbal modality that changes. We have French police kill a man after a fatal knife attack. In the beginning, it was a knife attack, then becomes a beheaded victim. And then the actor changes completely, and man beheads teacher on the street in France and is killed by police. Then the police became, you see in the visual modality, the policemen are smaller. The main object is the man and the teacher, and it's too hideous to see. Here it's open road, here it's a closed road. The modality changed because many readers were irritated by the first publication, and of course this was presented as a disproportionate use of police force and police brutality. The American media are very accustomed to police brutality, so they worked on this bias for a biased interpretation, and then through the intervention of many more interpretations, a new translation of the media came to view. And to close arguments, the methodology we use is the separation of actor network theory, actor network and black box, and the definitions of Calonne of the elements in the elements of sociology of translation, on how problematization, interestment, enrollment, and mobilization are steps that we follow in the process of translation, and how these processes reflect the experiential, interpersonal, and textual metafunctions of translation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, George. Anyone would ask something, some questions? I was curious about the age of the students that took place in the what's the name? I wrote here. What's going on in the picture? I was curious.
It's been applied in many cases, in many students in all ages. There is no limit age. It's just the readers of the New York Times. It's just a column in the New York Times, and once a week they present a picture from the archive of pictures. Of course, they have a huge archive of pictures, and they have some kind of criteria of selection. Maybe I will show you the. Okay. This is the virtual thinking strategies. In the paper, I will have the link, and this is the newspaper, what's going on in the picture. There are the three questions, and then you can see the picture and read the comments or write
Okay.
and you can find all these pictures in the archive. So it's a very valuable archive in order to understand and make research on what's going on between linguistically and visually in this in their semiotic process.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. Any questions? Anyone? So let's go with the third presentation, Marina Yezipenko, Image Schema, the Multimodal Resource for Global Meaning Making.
Hello, hello everyone. Hello, dear colleague. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for the amazing multimodal presentation. So a lot of interesting things I've refreshed also because multimodality is just one of my passions. So I'm sharing the screen now. Please tell me if you can see everything. It's okay?
Yes, okay.
Thank you. So today we are going to be talking about the desperate attempt to combine global meaning making and social semiotic theory. And namely, today we will more delve into global than social semiotic, because there has been like extensive research in social semiotic. And I decided why not dig into another direction. So today we will talk about how we can dig deeper into cognitive semiotics just to find something which is more universal for all of us rather than thinking about cultural or communal differences. So of course what I have been inspired by is something which we all now probably hate, but we're all in this together. And I was thinking that probably World Health Organization, who were giving out and transmitting the message all over the world in the form of infographic, are going to be really contributing into my research. So today we are going to look at the COVID representation in World Health Organization infographic on COVID-19, and we will try to see what kind of image schema we can globally perceive, like all of us, because we have a multinational community. Why I got interested in all of that? Because originally I am a teacher, and I am interested in literacy and what modern literacy is. And we all know that it's getting more and more global and fluid. And you won't say that in the previous presentation, we were talking about alphabetical, so basically, or linguistic understanding of the text, but now we understand that it's much more than that. And there are really rare occasions of monomodal representations. And literacy is becoming more networked, more multimodal, more focused on representing, more focused on opening up learning potential, creating and recreating new and old genres, and appropriating and recontextualizing science. So in this case, and sometimes it's a clever merge, it's a clever collection, or even it's a structure of many elements which do not have the additive sense, but which tend to get the very new meaning in the meaning-making process. So the research background, thus, is the global nature of communication and the digital expansion, and probably the need to dig deeper into more global meaning making in conjunction with social semiotic approaches. So this research never negates the social semiotic approach, because this is another part of my research, but also I'm thinking about not divorcing them, but rather marrying them together and to see where they intersect. So basically, of course, the only one of the few domains I could get into was cognitive semiotic. And basically, I was thinking about the way people get experience, and we understand that the content of our inner experience is essentially ontologically real, and because it is communally observable and measurable, and even though we don't know technically how this experience comes about yet, but still a lot of experiential systems and processes of meaning production are capable of being structurally stable, which implies kind of representational format, or internal intersemiosis, basically semiosis. So if internal and external semiotic processes cooperate in this relation, we are considering thinking and communication, probably they will be, and most probably they will be further culturally stabilized. And after that, they could even go into the macro world, into kind of more global meaning making, and they could develop into more solid inner schemas. So these schemas are actually the image schemas, which I would like to talk about, yes, and this is my research framework, but today we are focusing only on this top-down approach, the use of image schema, bottom-up approach, the use of MMDA, but this is not for today's research. And for like as an illustration, I've picked infographics with the metaphoric representation of reality. So basically, I'm taking, if we speak linguistically, I'm taking the approaches, the linguistic approaches to text. Top-down approach when we're looking at contextual features and discourse, and bottom-up approach when we're looking at more like at smaller constituent parts, starting from basically morphological to like more meaningful features. So basically, the most important thing about image schema, if you don't mind, I would like to read a little bit rather than speak. So one of the solutions, or one of the groundings of my research could be based on the premise that repeated human experience is cognitively structured with the help of generalized mental structures. So one example of this could be image schemas, and these are the spatio-temporal relationships used in cognitive science as building blocks with the view to conceptualize objects and events at the highest level of abstraction. And they are basically proved to be learned and acquired from the early sensory motor experiences and have been found in larger number in natural language and analogical reasoning. And of course, we know that they are covered in a range of disciplines, cognitive linguistic, developmental psychology, and formal knowledge representations, to name but a few. And one of the most, basically the most common ones are here, but we know that this is not the exhaustive list. There are many, many, many more, and with the most common ones being SPG, source path go, or containment, and all kinds of things. And previously, at the start, at the outset, they are, and actually in most of the research which I have found, they are used mostly for linguistic and textual representation. For example, the idea of containment, or the idea of go to work and so on. But in this research, I'm trying to employ it in terms of multimodal representation, both visual and linguistic modality. So the main aim of the research, is basically to explore the image schema to conceptualize different kind of changes. So not only static, but also dynamic properties of image schema, and with a view to a more systematic approach to complex and sophisticated concepts in events. So which means that in this research, I'm not only looking at the primitives, which are given here, but we're mostly looking at their combinations, and there will be a few of them. There will be merge, collection, and structured combination. And another thing is that image schemas are basically multimodal, continuous, and analogous patterns beneath conscious awareness. They are dynamic, and the downside of this research might be that they are formalized. So sometimes we understand that we are overgeneralizing some of the ideas, some of the issues, and we are making some things look more static than they really are. So we don't take variables into account. But the main questions which I have, image schemas, basically, if they are formalized, are they or should they be inclusive or restrictive? How they could be combined. So how does this intersemiosis happen? And is it possible to split them? So in this case, I'm not talking about primitives. I'm talking about texts being split into image schemas and then into image schemas and so on, and until it is logical. And basically what this logic is about, so this is the attempt to capture the basic spatio-temporal interactions grounded on the multimodal logics, and basically with the temporal structures being the primary modal theoretic objects, but sometimes at each moment of time, they allow complex proposition and the employment of the secondary semantics, and basically combination and recombination of the primitives, and not only primitives, but of the new clusters of image schema. So these are the main features, which we might be talking about. And the most important thing which I wanted to focus on is, first of all, the merge, that they could be further formally organized into the basically the not only the combination of different image schema, but the image schema which merge so tightly together that you cannot see, you cannot tell one from another. One of the examples of that could be, yeah, this one. And this is the case study of the World WHO infographics, and it gives the idea of safety. Actually, not only safety, but we understand that if we accept the new normal, we are getting safe. So, which means that if we take the rules proposed by the infographic, by the metaphorical representation given here, and by the image schema they are trying to communicate, we are going to be safe. How this merge happens? In this case, I was looking not only at the visual representation, I was looking also at the discourse features of the textual representation and trying to combine them together. And the most important thing is that neither of them plays an additive purpose. They are merging. So the most important thing is if we look at the something like below, at the picture below with the window, we will see the image schema of containment. And we will see the image schema of blockage. On the other hand, we also see another blockage which is built with the help of the flowers, but which somehow protects us, but without the previous understanding, for example, of the text or of the authority from the National Health Advisory, this enablement, we will never understand why we are being blocked from the outer world. So in this case, it's really hard to split it into separate modalities, but we need to look at all these things in merge, in combinations. The second thing which we would talk about is collection, and collection is the type of organization of concepts where image schemas coexist to describe the concept distinct from their properties. For example, one of the examples could be when we are talking about basically transportation. Yes, we understand that transportation or transport is the source, path, goal, image schema plus containment. And containment also gives us the idea of safety, that we get to our goal safe. And well, the image schema profiles do not seem to have any specific structure in this case or order, but they correspond to the gathered experience. So mainly if you go to pick some mushrooms, yes, and you put them into your basket, this is going, but anyway, it makes sense. So you understand what picking mushroom means to you. One of the examples from COVID representations would be this, like the case study of COVID spread. And we can see a great many of different image schemas put together, like cycle, near far, contact, blockage, source path, goal, to name but a few. There are really many of them. But on the other hand, they all make sense because we are trying to block the spread of COVID, and in which case. And you will never understand what these points, like small orange points, mean until you have read, or unless you have read the whole text together. And basically, we cannot say that if we change the order of some of these events, yes, or the order of some of these groups, something changes radically. That's why we call it a collection in this case. And finally, we have the final thing, which is structured, yes, so structured combination. And this is one of the examples of it could be here. So we have this idea of safety here, and impending doom or impending danger in the represented by the COVID waiting for us around the corner or behind the fence. And again, we see this image schema of source, path, goal. So lady is going somewhere with her daughter, but she is not expecting that something is happening. But when we start reading the text, we understand that she is expecting, and judging by the analysis of the discourse features, we see that somebody is biding its time. So COVID is biding its time and waiting for them while they are guarding down. Yes, if they guard down, everything will be lost. Again, we see the idea of blockage, which is represented by the fence, but this blockage also plays the role of containment, and it protects the woman, but on the other hand, it serves as the kind of barrier between a woman and a child and the basically the COVID. And mainly why I have picked infographics, because we can say that infographics are the metaphorical representations of events, and metaphor could be considered as an embodied phenomenon. And if we take, for example, like conceptual metaphor theory, Fauconnier, and if we take basically force wheel, yes, so we see that multimodal metaphors are basically very good representations of for like multimodal metaphors, let's say image schema and infographics well combined together, especially given the fact that people tend to communicate with infographic nowadays. So what I would like you to what conclusions I wanted to make after that. So global nature of meaning does exist, and it is, I'm yet to see how prevalent it is and so on. So I don't think that I can make any vast generalizations or swim in generalization. Yet I'm not sure that social semiotic or global nature of meaning, any universals could exist like separately. I'm pretty sure that we should try to marry both approaches. Another thing is these are only the three combinations of image schemas I've been using. I'm pretty sure that this list is not exhaustive, and there will be many, many, many more if people work in this direction. Some of them could be too formalized and too rigid, and sometimes it depends on the focus of your attention and the meaning potential of the text. But I'm pretty sure that multimodality, different modes, they really contribute to meaning making. And of course, it has obvious effect on the nature of meaning making and the obvious effect on literacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marina, for your speech. So if anyone wants to ask something, a question, feel free to do that. I will make a comment because I'm very interested in all your speeches. I'm a design professor, and I think all that is very important for our students that are going to make these meanings in the future. So wonderful speech.
Yes, thanks a lot. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So we are going to the last presentation. I will show my screen, 1 minute. Are you seeing? Thank you.
Yes, we are seeing.
So my speech is a little different, but I think it's the same idea of transmitting messages. So I'm dealing with habitus, a cultural semiotic relationship. I'm from Brazil, Rio de Janeiro. And as I said before, I'm a design professor. So I'm very interested about these concepts and process of getting the structures from society and going back to society with our actions. So Pierre Bourdieu used the habitus as a key concept of his theory of action. For him, habitus would be a set of fundamental schemes previously assimilated from which an infinity of private schemes are generated, directly applied to particular situations. This concept reconciles the subject-society dichotomy, as it understands habitus as a mediating concept. The fundamental schemes from the social structure are assimilated by the subjects and returned to the society through private actions. With habitus, Bourdieu intended to offer another sociological proposal in which social and individual are engendered, the latter being the power of action. This relational aspect interwoven the habitus points to the possibility of understanding it as a sign between individual and society. Thus, the aim of this research is to understand habitus from the point of view of Peirce's philosophy. Although Peirce and Bourdieu do not present an evident connection between their thoughts, we will see that there is a common denominator that goes back to scholastic writings. Therefore, it becomes possible to read the cultural relationship between subject and society in Bourdieu as a semiotic process. This research wants to highlight the inventive capacity of the individual in his semiotic process of creating culture, in order to instigate the reflection of communicators, designers, and other agents on the ethical issue involved in this process. Bourdieu took the concept of habitus from Erwin Panofsky's book. The German art and critic and historian stated that it's possible to make a relationship between Gothic architecture and scholasticism that took place at the same time and space, because the scholastic mental habits became expressed in the Gothic cathedrals. We can see that the concept of habitus relates ideas and artifacts, explaining the manifestation of a thought in a materiality. Habitus was the Latin translation for the medieval philosopher Aquinas for the Aristotelian notion of hexis present in Ethics Book 5th. Aristotle elaborated this concept in his virtue doctrine, and he understood habitus as an acquired and firmly established state of moral character that guides our feelings and desires in a situation, and as such, our conduct. Bourdieu, who was a researcher interested in the process of transmitting culture, realized the richness of this concept that allows the subject who holds the mental habit to be connected with society, which offers these structures, without removing the inventive capacity of the individual. The habitus is an acquired knowledge, a generating principle that prepares individuals' action. The subjects internalize the external social structures and externalize what is individual to the social through actions. Therefore, the social starts to belong to the individuals to bear their capital, and their action starts to have an impact on society. This process can occur unconsciously, and for this reason, we can understand how Gothic architects materialized the mental habits of scholasticism in their cathedrals. In this way, the habitus makes the artists participate in the collectivity of their time, even without being aware of it. This reproducibility of a mental model in artifacts stems from the inertia that habitus incorporates. Thus, it's clear that there is a tendency in the habitus to maintain the social practices established in society. To give an example of this, first we have to highlight a point. The concept of habitus can also be used to explain the manifestation of mental habits in other types of cultural artifacts, in addition to architecture, such as design objects, books, plays, clothes, as well as the programming of the systems and platforms we use. In the film Coded Bias from Netflix, we can see how harmful habitus, such as racism, for example, ends up reproducing itself in the creation of programming codes. The film shows that partial data inputted in artificial intelligences end up generating biased results. In this case, the lack of black faces images causes a social problem with facial identification. However, it's important to stress that if there were only necessarily a mere reproduction of these practices, the subject would be a simple reproducer of a larger structure. Bourdieu didn't believe in this idea and proposed that even if there is an inertia, there is the possibility of transformation and invention on the part of the subject. Individuals interpret social experience according to their filters and can modify the current practices by changing the actions prepared by habitus. But before showing one example of this process, let's see what Peirce understands as habits and what is the relationship between Peirce, Panofsky, and Bourdieu, which will help us to clarify the understanding of habitus as a social and cultural mediation. Peirce also addressed the relationship between the Gothic and the scholasticism. Peirce wrote in a similar way to Panofsky that if someone wants to know what scholasticism is and what the tone of his thought is, just contemplate a Gothic cathedral. This understanding of action and materiality as an external aspect of ideas comes precisely from a common matrix, scholasticism. Aquinas' concepts are present in Panofsky's work, as well as Duns Scotus, another scholastic philosopher, in Peirce's. There is also confirmation that Panofsky knew Peirce's ideas, and he quotes him more than once in his writings. Content, as opposed to theme, can be described in Peirce's words as what the work denounces but does not show. Therefore, it's not strange that the notion of habitus is close to Peirce's concepts regarding habit. To analyze social relations, we can see that it's through inductive inferences that an individual starts from the lived experience to create a habit that determines a future action. This inference can be made consciously or unconsciously, and many times we do not perceive the motivation of our actions evidently. This habit, this general rule, which points to a filter, is perturbedness. The third phenomenological category generates the maintenance of actions and practices, because if we have a habit, we tend to reproduce it in our actions. However, Peirce did not believe in a deterministic world, because although there is a tendency toward thirdness, firstness never ceases to act. In addition, individuals have the capacity of self-control that can alter their behaviors. And now I'm quoting Peirce. The force of habit will sometimes cause a man to hold on the old beliefs after he is in a condition to see that they have no sound basis. But reflection upon the state of the case will overcome these habits, and he ought to allow reflection its full weight. In his semiotics, Peirce understands the sign in its character of mediation. The concept of habitus can be understood, therefore, as a representation, a sign that mediates the relationship between the past social experiences and the future actions in society, between the cultural heritage that forge us and the culture with which we contribute. Through the inductive method, the experience with past phenomena generates a representation in the mind, a habit, that mediates, therefore, a potential action in a semiotic process. In this process, signs evolve. For Peirce, a sign is determined by its object, also sign, and always generates another more developed sign, uninterpreted, in a continuous chain. In this sense, it's worth mentioning that cultural products can be understood as actions, the outer side of this habitus. A film, for example, embodies the beliefs of its creators that are commonly the result of the social and cultural habitus of the context where they have grown up. Thus, if we have seen an example of a harmful habit before, we also have to remember that there are many positive habits and beliefs that incorporate the cultural process. Man's self-control becomes crucial in the semiotic process of propagating habitus. It's the human capacity to reflect and decide what action to take that flavors the breaking of a harmful belief in a deliberate way. And it's this oriented conduct that promotes cultural change in a society. Peirce, in his pragmatism, establishing the relationship between an inner thought and an outer action, addressed the issue of fixing belief and breaking habit. When a habit becomes unrepresentative in relation to past and future experiences, it must be replaced by another one, which can determine future action more effectively. And this acquisition of a new habit constitutes learning. And an example I can give you is its Brazilian beer advertising. Traditionally, breweries have tended to advertise their products with images of objectified women, showing only one kind of women stereotype, as you can see here in the slide. But Skol, a Brazilian brewery, subverted this model some years ago and invited 8 female illustrators to recreate male chauvinist posters from previous campaigns. This campaign was launched on International Women's Day and had a huge impact, changing the way we Brazilians deal with feminism. So here we see in the left the traditional ad, Brazilian ad for beer, and in the other side we can see the recreation of this idea of this ad with my body and my rules. And here we can see also 2 different illustrations from one previously campaign. Therefore, the infinitive semiosis of cultural relations is built from the confirmations and subversions of the habitus. And the pragmatic aspect of this semiosis is evident in this process of transforming thoughts into cultural products and cultural products into thoughts, all of them signs. Finally, it's worth highlighting an important issue regarding the concept of habitus. It was originally quoted in an ethic book, since it prepares conduct. Peirce, in his division of science, founded his semiotics on ethics, as thoughts are externalized in actions. Since habitus can be understood as signs that mediate our relationship with society, it's important to shed light on how these habits are incorporated and reinforced. It's essential to creators becoming aware of the mental process and movements of acquisition of these laws. Above all, it's important to develop self-control over our actions, as they will have practical consequences in the world in form of cultural artifacts. Reinforcing or breaking habits must be the choice of each individual, designers, writers, directors, other agents, so the cultural artifacts can convey positive habitus for society. Thank you very much. So now if you want to, let me see, how can I stop sharing? No, I'm not sharing anymore, isn't it? So if you have any asks, any questions? Oh, now I'm not sharing. It's okay. So if you don't have any asks, any questions, I will end this panel. I think it was a wonderful panel. We have a lot to discuss further this. And I will tell you that we have another keynote lecture, Massimo Leone, now at 6 o'clock in Bucharest time. Mohamed, do you want to ask something? No? Okay, thank you. So that's all, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for the presentations. That was wonderful. Thank you very much, and see you later in the keynote lecture. Bye.
Thank you very much.